take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth. Hey!
Spanning the continent to bring you the truth about cannabis and marijuana law reform.
I smoke pot and I like it a lot.
CannabisRadio.com presents The Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation.
Hey, this is great, man.
Now, here's your host, Radical Russ Belville.
Good day, tokers and tokettes and non-toking lovers of liberty. It is Monday, December 19th, 2016, and it's got to be 420 somewhere in the world. Welcome, everyone, to the show. Glad to have you here. I am back and better than ever from Jamaica, man. I actually have lost a little bit of my pale Pacific Northwest fish belly white complexion to the sons of Jamaica, man. I don't really tan. It's more like my freckles just start to move together. So call it what you will. And of course, if you followed my Facebook or you follow any of my social media pages, you know we have to start today with a little bit of a somber note. Today's show is dedicated to one of the greatest beings I've ever had the pleasure of knowing. That's right, Roscoe P. Coltrane, the official dog of the Russ Belville Show. You know, I had my plan was to go on vacation in Jamaica, spend 10 days there, and then spend 3 days in South Florida so I could visit with my ex, who has custody of my dog Roscoe. And yes, good boy Roscoe. And so I thought I'd spend 3 days in Florida, get to see my dog. Well, turns out while I was in Jamaica on a Friday night, Roscoe escaped the house, ran into the road, and was hit by a car and killed. So I didn't get to see Roscoe. I missed him by 8 days, unfortunately. But I still made my way to South Florida. My ex-wife and I collected his ashes from his cremation. What a great veterinary service, by the way. A person driving on the road had picked up his body and took it to the vet, and we had him chipped, so they were able to identify him. And they made a mold, like a plaster cast of his paw. They made a donation to the Humane Society in his name. They were just wonderful people. So thanks to them, thanks to those vets, and thanks to the person who was so kind in retrieving Roscoe's body for us. We appreciated that. So we spread some of Roscoe's ashes in the Atlantic, and then we took a road trip across Florida and spread some of his ashes in the Gulf. Roscoe really loved the water, and so we're trying to spread some of his ashes in all the different bodies of water. I have some now to take to the Willamette River, the Columbia River, and the Pacific Ocean. So this show is dedicated to Roscatelli, Smelly Felly, Semicolon, Puckerbutt, Nut Stomper, Boob Squisher, Sanchez, Gomez, Rodriguez, Ramirez, Coltrane, my dog, my Jack Russell terrorist, 2005 to 2016. All right, let's get to the show today because so much has gone on since I have been in the sun in Jamaica, drinking far too much rum cream. Of course, we got that note about the DEA rescheduling, or not really rescheduling, but coming up with a new rule with regard to CBD. We're going to talk about that in the Behind the Headlines segment, DEA's new rule on CBD, and are they inventing the law? Are they just interpreting the law? We'll get into that a little bit. Also on the show, in drug war data mining, one of my favorite surveys came out, the Monitoring the Future survey. This is the one where they've been asking 12th graders since 1975 their various opinions about marijuana, and it's more good news for the legalization cause. We'll talk about that in drug war data mining. And, of course, it's Monday. That means that we get our regular dose of cannabis science from Dr. Mitch Earlywine in our Cannabis Q&A. We'll take your live calls at 650-LEGAL-MJ. That's 650-534-2565. All sorts of new studies to talk about. Cannabis and pregnancy, cannabis and schizophrenia, cannabis and parenting, cannabis and your vision, cannabis and your sex life. Plenty of stuff to listen to when we get to that segment. Then we'll end up this hour with my radical rant regarding Mark and Jody Emery and Jeremiah Vandermeer being busted up in Montreal, asking the question, can you be a cannabis capitalist and a marijuana activist? I think you can. And in hour two, we got some reefer madness to debunk, so stay tuned.
This is the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com.
Earn your PhD in THC monetization with CannabisRadio.com. Don't be late.
Play as Ted Growing, expelled botany sophomore and the biggest grower in town, only on Weed Firm Replanted. Available on the App Store and Google Play.
It's a lot of work being the biggest grower in town. Maintaining a room full of plants while dealing with a slew of eccentric customers? From a hardcore partier to the curious neighbor next door.
Is anybody home?
Help me expand my bud business by unlocking new strains, customizing my grow room, and completing challenges that you can't get enough of. Grow your empire so big you can see it from space. Low on funds? Don't worry. Weed Firm Replanted is free to download.
Download Weed Firm Replanted for free on the App Store and Google Play today. Get growing, Mr. Growing.
We love the earth.
I'm Radical Russ Belville, inviting you to join me every weekday on CannabisRadio.com for the Russ Belville Show. It's the NPR of POT. We bring you the latest marijuana headlines, cannabis analysis, drug war data, activist interviews, radical rants, and your live calls. Join me every weekday at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern, live only on CannabisRadio.com.
You're not high. You're listening to the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com.
The Supreme Court is wrong on the Second Amendment.
Okay, maybe you're high, too.
Hey everybody, it's Radical Russ here from 420 Radio, inviting you to be like me and get your ink done at Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo, Fort Worth's most female-friendly, clean, sterile, awesome tattoo shop. Thomas and his crew are true artists who can design you a custom piece or use a design you bring in. Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo also offers all styles of tattooing as well as piercings and all-around fun. In the DFW area, stop by Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo and tell them Radical Russ sent you. Trust me, it'll feel awesome.
It's time for the Cannabis Radio News, covering the latest headlines in consumer cannabis, medical marijuana, and industrial hemp. Cannabis Radio News is now available exclusively at CannabisRadio.com. Now your marijuana headlines in 4 minutes and 20 seconds. This is Cannabis Radio News.
This is your Cannabis Radio News for Monday, December 19th, 2016. Canada's government said Tuesday it would study a federal task force's recommendation that Canadians over 18 years old be allowed to buy marijuana for recreational purposes and would announce new laws in the spring for legalizing pot. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has long promised to legalize recreational pot use and sales. If the legislation passes, Canada would be the largest developed country to end prohibition of recreational marijuana. The Marijuana Task Force, headed by former Canadian Health Minister Anne McClellan, recommended that adults be allowed to carry up to 30 grams of pot for recreational purposes and grow up to 4 plants. It also recommended that higher potency pot be taxed at a higher rate than weaker strains. It also said recreational marijuana should not be sold in the same location as alcohol or tobacco. Under the proposals, alcohol-free cannabis lounges would be allowed. Montreal police have launched raids against illegal cannabis stores opened one day earlier by the self-proclaimed Prince of Pot, Mark Emery, and his wife, Jody. Emery and his wife were among 10 people arrested in Friday's raids. Police said that all but one person, who refused to sign the release documents, were released on a promise to appear in court. Canada is moving to legalize marijuana, but it remains illegal. Mark Emery has been expanding his chain of dispensaries across Canada, despite the fact that the drug is still illegal. Cannabis Culture, the brand owned by the Emerys, already has a dozen shops. Hundreds of customers lined the street throughout the day on Friday to make their first pot purchases at the Mount Royal Montreal location. The store reportedly sold out of its stock, leaving only cash for the police to find. The Mexican Senate on Tuesday overwhelmingly passed a bill approving the use of marijuana for medicinal purposes, the latest in a series of legal changes and court rulings that have somewhat relaxed cannabis laws in Mexico. The legislation now goes to the lower chamber of deputies for consideration. Some lawmakers argued that the bill does not go far enough because it does not cover individual cultivation of marijuana. Starting last year, the Mexican government began granting permits, letting some patients import medicinal marijuana products. It has also decriminalized small amounts of marijuana and issued several permits for people to cultivate and possess pot for personal use. A voter-approved law allowing adults to possess, grow, and use limited amounts of recreational marijuana took effect Thursday in Massachusetts, but it will still be at least another year before the state issues retail licenses to sell marijuana. For now, that leaves recreational users with little choice but to buy it from illegal dealers. Adults 21 and over may possess up to 1 ounce of marijuana outside their homes. Adults 21 and over may possess up to 10 ounces of pot inside their homes. The law allows individual adults 21 and over to grow up to 6 marijuana plants at home and up to 12 plants per household if 2 or more adults live in the home. And similar to the law that bans open containers of alcohol in a car, you can't have open containers of pot either. That applies whether the car is moving or not and can bring a fine of up to $500. It's okay to have 1 ounce or less of pot in the car if it's in a sealed container. Possibly the unlikeliest customer of all became the first person to legally buy marijuana in Alaska's largest city. Anna Ercole, age 81, pulled into Arctic Herbery's small parking lot at 8:30 a.m., 3.5 hours before the store was to open, and became the first legal retail marijuana store in Anchorage. Ercole, a native of Italy who has lived in Anchorage for 45 years, said, quote, "I need this medication for me because it works better than taking anti-pain or sleeping pills and not really solving anything," end quote. A member of the girl group Fifth Harmony has been charged with possessing marijuana at Dulles International Airport. Metropolitan Washington Airports Authority spokesman Rob Yingling says Lauren Yaragui was charged Tuesday by authority police and released on a summons to appear in court. The group was formed on The X Factor, won Collaboration of the Year at the American Music Awards last month for Work From Home with Ty Dolla $ign. Yaragui was charged with the $25 fine and released on her own recognizance. This has been your Cannabis Radio News for Monday, December 19th, 2016. I'm Russ Belville.
Forwarding the cause of legalization and research of the growing cannabis industry, one podcast at a time. The Cannabis Radio Network.
Equio, New Frontier's cutting-edge big data platform, puts the information and answers you need right at your fingertips in real time to help you more effectively run your cannabis business. Go to www.equio.io to sign up for your free membership today. Again, that's www.equio.io. Run with New Frontier and let us help you conquer the wild.
This is Cannabis Facts from Robert Platshorn's thesilvertour.org, supported by our donors and Hemp Inc., poised to lead America's hemp revolution at hempinc.com. In 1937, the second most prescribed medicine, marijuana, was banned. It wasn't about marijuana. The paper, oil, and chemical industries lobbied to end hemp farming. No longer labor intensive, an acre of hemp produced more quality paper than 4 acres of trees. Plastics and fibers could be produced from a plant. Hemp can even produce 10 times the energy of today's ethanol. As marijuana prohibition ends, many states now allow farmers to again grow hemp. This was Cannabis Facts from thesilvertour.org, an educational nonprofit supported by our donors and Hemp Inc., a public company poised to process America's hemp crop at hempinc.com.
Warning. Hits taken on this show are larger than they appear. Do not try this at home. These people are professionals, or at least they pay me to say that. A public service message from CannabisRadio.com and the Russ Belville Show.
New beginner guitars and banjos are often constructed much better than ones built before your time. Why struggle? Get a new instrument or fix the old one. The trusted professionals at the Fingerboard Extension will evaluate your instrument for free. Repairs are priced for people who work for a living. Stop by the Fingerboard Extension downtown Corvallis at 120 Northwest 2nd Street today, or check out its inventory on the web at fingerboardextension.com.
The world of cannabis is evolving at a frenetic pace. The Russ Belville Show gets behind the headlines to take a deeper look at breaking news in our Cannabis Focus.
Today in the Cannabis Focus, I want to talk a little bit about this supposed new rule regarding cannabidiol in America. It's brought up a lot of controversy that has been underlying the entire CBD industry for years now, and this just brings it back to the front burner. And the question being, is CBD oil legal? You'll hear from many of these companies that are selling various hemp oil products that it is. You'll hear their tagline that it's 100% legal in all 50 states. Others in the drug policy movement will tell you, no, CBD is not legal. It is a Schedule I drug. It is part of cannabis. It is not legal. And it all hinges on a bunch of different court cases and rulings. The idea here that is being promoted by the people in the hemp industries, in these hemp oil industries, is that as long as CBD is derived from hemp stalks, it is legal. That is their position. That's their belief. If it comes from hemp stalks, it's legal. And it's based on a series of court rulings that had to do with the DEA back in the early 2000s trying to shut down the hemp foods industry, trying to shut down hemp seed oil and hemp cake and hemp lotions and soaps, Dr. Bronner kind of stuff. And it wound its way through the courts, and the decisions that were regarding it had to do with the way that the Controlled Substances Act is written that makes marijuana illegal. And the definitions have to do with the plant cannabis sativa and all the seeds and oil and flower and leaf and all the stuff that comes through it, but with an exemption for industrial hemp. That if, it's below 0.3% THC and it's a fiber crop, then that isn't counted. And the hemp people won this case. The Hemp Industries Association won this case back in the 2000s that allowed hemp seed oil and hemp soaps and hemp lotions. That's why you can get this stuff at a Whole Foods, at a market in any state, right? Because it's got no THC in it and it's not falling under the Controlled Substances Act. Well, the problem is that this definition and these decisions all had to do with something that wasn't being considered any sort of medical substance, any sort of medicine to be taken. We're talking about hemp soaps, hemp oils, for ingestion, for nutrition. Now they're trying to take those same decisions that had to do with those types of hemp-derived products and apply that to cannabidiol being used as a medical substance, being used to, treat epilepsy or whatever. And so this is where the conflict comes, because when it comes to any constituent of the cannabis plant, any cannabinoid being used as medicine, that's where it falls under the Controlled Substances Act. It has no medical value and is therefore in Schedule I and banned. So what had happened here is that the DEA came out with a new ruling, and it's just a kind of an organizational reform at the DEA, which is to come up with a new schedule code or a new coding number for marijuana extracts. And this was to any sort of cannabidiol extract, or for that matter, cannabigerol, cannabichromine, any of the other CBGs, the CBCs and all that. And to indicate this other number to be able to track marijuana extracts of CBD separate than they track THC or separate than they track flower and so forth. So it was really just kind of a paperwork, bureaucratic sort of change. But this let everybody say, oh my God, the DEA is now trying to say cannabidiol is illegal. Well, no, they're not. They're just coming up with a new category for something they believe has always been illegal. The DEA has never said that cannabidiol is legal, despite all of these it's legal in 100% legal in 50 states type companies. Now, these companies think they're interpreting the law correctly. The DEA thinks they're interpreting the law correctly. But none of this has been challenged or tested. So there's a lot of confusion reigning right now over this issue. And to bring some light to this, I'm going to have some guests coming on the show this week. We're going to hear from Paul Armentano, the Deputy Director of NORML, one of the most informed people on marijuana issues, who believes strongly that Cannabidiole's always been illegal. This doesn't change anything. And these people that are selling these CBD oils are trying to pull a fast one. We'll also hear from a North Carolina attorney who believes the opposite, who believes that the Controlled Substances Act does not allow the DEA to make this decision about cannabidiol. It has to be done by Congress.
What is the main food that penguins eat? Spam?
So we'll get to the bottom of this CBD ruling this week here on the Russ Belville Show with some of the experts, because I got to tell you, it gets pretty deep into the federal code and the court cases, and I'm not sure I can give you an accurate interpretation without some other voices. So we'll find that out. Stay tuned when we come back. Drug war data mining on monitoring the future and teen use.
Next to THC and CBD, you can now add CBR to your cannabis vernacular. CBR as in cannabisradio.com.
Oh, let the marijuana llama tell you something now about a game for your phone gonna make you say, wow! The game's about the game of growing cannabis for cash. Grow the seed, sell the bud, put the savings in the stash. Little by little, your empire grows large. Put the big celebrities inside your entourage. You can choose to play with Snoop or me or Cheech and Chong. Cypress Hill, Willie Nelson, Wiz Khalifa with a bong. The name of the game is Hemp Inc., that's the point. Download and play while you light yourself a joint. The business of cannabis should be no crime. Hemp Inc. is even hot-proofed by the man who run High Times. Oh yeah? Get it on Android and iOS today. Marijuana llama out. Got to tend to me own crops, you know. Money don't make itself. Hemp Inc.
Growing green to generate more green.
Hello to all you happy herbalizers, smiling trippy hippies, and everyone who believes in freedom and tolerance. This is The Grow Show, and I'm Kyle Cushman.
From food to fuel, from remedy to resource.
Welcome my guest, Ed Rosenthal, the guru of ganja. Let me ask you, right now I hear your lighter clicking. Are you smoking indoor or are you smoking sun-grown?
What am I smoking? I'm smoking concentrate.
Way to get out of the answer there. So you're truly like the king, right? You just clap your hands and somebody brings you a bowl and you're all set, right?
I wish that were the case.
The Grow Show with Kyle Cushman, only on CannabisRadio.com.
The Russ Belville Show. We're as much like Cheech and Chong as ordinary Americans are like the Three Stooges. Hey, Mo!
At Herbie's Cannabis Seeds, we pride ourselves on bringing you the best quality seeds from the world's most respected cannabis seed producers, all at the lowest online prices. You can find Herbie's seeds at herbiesheadshop.com. All cannabis seeds are sold as souvenirs and as a means of preserving cannabis genetics. Herbie's Seeds in no way intends to condone, promote, or incite the use of illegal or controlled substances. We strongly urge all prospective customers to check their national laws prior to placing an order. Herbie's Seeds at herbiesheadshop.com. Proud sponsors of the Russ Belville Show and 420 Radio.
Promoting the end of adult cannabis prohibition is easy because we have facts, science, reason, compassion, evidence, truth, and logic on our side. It's even easier when researchers catalog it all for us. Learn how to gather the facts on marijuana use, arrests, seizures, rehabs, drug tests, and more on this edition of Drug War Data Mining.
Today at the Drug War Data Mines, we want to take at the latest information out of the Monitoring the Future study. This has been asking the high school students since 1975, high school seniors since the 1990s, 10th graders and 8th graders, their various perceptions and use of different drugs. And the latest news from the Monitoring the Future study has shown us that despite us legalizing marijuana in now 8 states and legalizing medical use in 28 states, the kids are not all turning into pot zombies. What do you know? In fact, the latest numbers that we get here show us that we've got fewer kids using marijuana than we have seen since the height of the drug war in the early 90s. What we've got here is for past month use among 8th graders, we have dropped down to 5.4%. 5.4%. That's down from 6.5% just the year before. So a big drop among 8th graders. Daily use from the 8th graders down to 0.7% from 1.1 the year before. High school seniors, they show 22.5% with past month use and 6% with daily use. That's pretty high, but it's no higher than it's been the past few years, statistically speaking. That is, high school senior use has remained relatively stable since 2012, since we've legalized in these states. And I'll tell you why. It's because high school seniors already got their hookup. The idea that legalization was going to somehow lead to more teenagers using marijuana is predicated on the idea that it would somehow be easier for them to get marijuana if it were legal. Folks, it couldn't be any easier for an older teenager to get a hold of marijuana. This same Monitoring the Future study for over 40 years has asked the seniors, how easy would it be for you to get a bag? And between 80 and 90% of them, for 40 years, whether use goes up, whether use goes down, whether it's just say no, whether it's Bill Clinton, I didn't inhale, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. The same number of kids, more or less, say that marijuana is easy to get. So how could it have gotten any easier once we started putting it in childproof packages in adults-only store where they check your ID before you can even get in? No, the use of marijuana is going up among older folks like me because we didn't have a hookup. We couldn't go behind the shop class after lunch hour and find our guy. We're not going to wait 30 minutes in a Walgreens parking lot for a bag that's 2 grams short and full of sticks and stems that's 30 minutes late. No, legalizing marijuana is for us, the older adults. For the kids, we're finding their use is going down. Among the 10th graders, cannabis use in the past year among 10th graders is stable, but at the lowest levels in over 2 decades. Now, that's nationally speaking, but even if you start looking at the states themselves, like Colorado, the federal data released last year showed teen use rates in Colorado and Washington essentially flat. The rates of cannabis use in Colorado's teenagers flat since 2012, according to the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. The levels of teen use in Colorado have not increased since they've ended prohibition and remain lower than the national average. In California, where they've got, it's always been quasi-legal there in California. As an 18-year-old, you can walk into a doc in the box and claim you've got anxiety. I've got anxiety. I'm afraid of getting arrested, and get your medical card. They've seen no significant difference in their teen usage. The studies that come out in this, the Lancet Psychiatry study, showed no significant difference in adolescent cannabis use in states that have medical cannabis laws. Over 24 years of data, 1 million teenagers in 48 states, no difference. It doesn't seem to have any effect. And what's really fun about this is to see how the longtime drug warriors can't wrap their mind around what's going on here. They for so long have been predicting the worst would happen if we were to legalize marijuana. And yet they're not able to figure out why. When this is from Dr. Nora Volkoff. She is the director of the National Institute of Drug Abuse. In Huffington Post, she writes, "It was also reassuring to see that despite concern that wider availability and softening attitudes toward marijuana would lead to increased use by teens, use has remained relatively stable over the last decade. We cannot become complacent, however. Marijuana use still remains high among teens who stand to be adversely affected, yada, 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 6%, yada, yada." When she was asked in another story that I was reporting on this, she just was baffled. So we can't explain it. What do you know? We legalized pot and the kids didn't turn all into pot zombies. This is some of the data that we're getting from monitoring the future. We're also finding that other marks of drug use are down as well. Any illicit drug, down. Binge drinking, down. Many of these, cigarette smoking at historically low levels. And it's always funny to me how our opponents are very quick to jump on a correlation when it works their direction, right? If marijuana happens and then something bad happens, see, marijuana made bad things happen. But when we see marijuana use remaining steady, when we see the laws around marijuana being relaxed for adults, and then we see fewer opioid overdoses, we see fewer kids binge drinking, we see fewer kids using illicit drugs. Boy, they don't jump at that correlation then, do they? Boy, they're not willing to say, well, look, we legalized marijuana and look at all the good things that are happened. No, they never look at it that way, do they? Well, I guess that's why I'm here, right? To look at it for them. All right, stay tuned, folks. We've got Dr. Mitch Earlywine joining us for our last Cannabis Q&A segment of 2016. We got pregnancy and parenting and sex and basketball. Stay tuned.
This is the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com.
Keep your cannabis cravings under control. Feed your mind with CannabisRadio.com. The National Cannabis Industry Association presents the Seed to Sale Show, January 31st and February 1st at the Colorado Convention Center in Denver. Register now at www.seedtosaleshow.com or 888-409-4418. The NCIA Seed to Sale Show, the largest cannabis business event to be held in Denver, will host over 2,000 cannabis professionals and focus on innovations and technology in cultivation, infused products and extraction, and sales strategies. The show will recognize the best in the industry with the Cannovation and Cannatech Awards. Register before January 6th for $100 savings at seedtosaleshow.com. Use the code RADIO15 for an additional 15% off. Plan your experience now for the NCIA Seed to Sale Show, January 31st and February 1st. Seedtosaleshow.com or 888-409-4418.
Georgia. Hi, this is Willie Nelson. Alcohol prohibition didn't work in the 1920s, and marijuana prohibition isn't working today. It's time we stopped arresting responsible marijuana smokers. It's the fair thing to do.
For more information, contact NORML, the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. Call toll-free 888-67-NORML or visit their website at norml.org.
Get the latest updates on the Russ Belville Show by following Radical Russ on Twitter and liking the Russ Belville Show on Facebook.
Hey everybody, it's Radical Russ here from 420 Radio, inviting you to be like me and get your ink done at Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo, Fort Worth's most female-friendly, clean, sterile, awesome tattoo shop. Thomas and his crew are true artists who can design you a custom piece or use a design you bring in. Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo also offers all styles of tattooing as well as piercings and all-around fun. In the DFW area, stop by Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo and tell them Radical Russ sent you. Trust me, it'll feel awesome.
It's time for the Russ Belville Show's Cannabis Q&A with Dr. Mitch Earlywine. Dr. Earlywine is a professor of psychology at the State University of New York at Albany and a leading author and researcher on cannabinoids and health, who pins the Ask Dr. Mitch column for High Times magazine. Get your questions ready in our live chat or call in to 971-533-7111 now.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Quick reminder, we've got a new phone number here at the Russ Belville Show. It's 650-LEGAL-MJ. That's 650-534-2565 if you've got a call for Dr. Mitch. And we welcome Dr. Mitch Earlywine back for our final Q&A segment of 2016. Hi, Dr. Mitch.
Woohoo!
Yay! Hey, are you snowed in up there in Albany?
It's not too bad.
Yeah, we actually got snow that stuck here in Portland, and of course the entire Metroplex shuts down. They can't take it out here. It's nothing like Albany. Oh, boy. All right, let's get to some of the questions and studies that we've got on tap here, because there's a lot to get through. Been on vacation a couple of weeks, and the first one we have to look at here is a Bristol University study coming out of the UK that, boy, this is a bizarro study coming out of the UK saying that cannabis may not cause schizophrenia. My goodness, are they coming around on this, Dr. Mitch?
Well, we've had slight evidence in this direction before where maybe folks are using cannabis to self-medicate when they have some modest psychotic symptoms, and they've got some data that are consistent with that. Thornycraft talked about this in 1990. I've talked about this before in work that goes completely uncited, so I guess we're just going to have to say it again and again until people come up with the idea that maybe cannabis doesn't cause schizophrenia.
Is this one where, a little dab will do you kind of thing, where it's a moderate amount, but if you use too much, it starts to push things the other direction? Do we see any of that in the data?
This was actually a study of initiation, so it turned out the folks who already had these sort of modest psychotic-like symptoms were more likely to start in the first place.
Oh, okay. Got that. So what we've been saying about the whole self-medication thing is beginning to look like it's a little more getting some backing to it in the science.
Exactly.
That's good to hear. Okay. We've heard this many times, with this cannabis and schizophrenia, and I always like to point to the stat that showed, for the past 100 years, what schizophrenia remains around 1% of the population, whether there's a lot of tokers or few tokers. Isn't that right?
Exactly. It's just a little under 1%, and now that we've got better prenatal care, it's dropping to, say, between 0.5 and 1%. And I think really this is partly a product of some deviant diagnostic situations and some of the self-report measures that ask questions that are loosely associated with schizophrenia are actually things that tokers might endorse anyway, simply because we are part of an underground culture and have some of our own language.
Good point. Now, our next study is really more of a survey that's finding, we've talked about the issue of cannabis use during pregnancy, good, bad, healthy, unhealthy, but this is just, are they doing it? And we're finding more U.S. women are using cannabis during their pregnancy. And what does this tell us about their possible health outcomes? Are we seeing any increases in problems with birth?
Well, so that's the irony, is we really don't know if this is a problem or not. We've had some data where there are modest increases in likelihood of ending up in the NICU, and then another data set where it said, oh, your kid is more likely to have ADHD, but then they didn't look at ADHD in the moms. But all we've got here is just that it's more likely that folks who are pregnant are using it. I can't say if it's a bad thing or a good thing, and if we do have negative outcomes associated with it, it's probably not going to show up for a couple of decades.
Well, this kind of ties into another thing that I'd picked up on National Public Radio, this story they did about doctors saying parenting and pot smoking don't mix. And part of this story talked about new surveys, new tests that they have to be able to detect marijuana metabolites in the children of cannabis consumers, not from the mother passing it on in the womb or anything, but just like secondhand smoke exposure. And they're trying to say, oh, this secondhand cannabis smoke, it's as bad as secondhand tobacco smoke. What's the real deal in this study here, in this information?
In fact, what this is suggesting is there might be some, but again, it's at levels that are just so low that even if it is detectable, it doesn't necessarily lead to some kind of deficit in the kids. But yeah, the bottom line is, hey, don't hotbox the car with the kid in it.
And when I was listening to this and read some of the follow-ups on it too, I was I kind of had that same reaction. It's like, oh, you detected small levels of metabolites in children, and
exactly.
Like, what else is there? is there they go off this a priori assumption that if we find it in the kid, it is therefore bad, without any follow-up onto is that actually the case. And we often talk too when we discuss this whole pot and parenting thing, the idea of whether or not, just morally or ethically speaking, parents ought to smoke pot in front of their kids. Is there any social science research on that as to whether or not, kids that see their parents smoking pot are more likely to do it or not? Do we know anything in that regard?
As it turns out, they are, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're more likely to develop problems with it. So it ends up being a strange situation where, yes, like breeds like. We also have, folks who see their parents drink are more likely to drink. Folks who see their parents vote Republican are more likely to vote Republican. So it just doesn't really have much of beyond a standard modeling result.
Well, of those outcomes, I think the kids smoking the pot is probably the least harmful for society. All right.
Definitely.
It is the Electoral College's meeting today, so I just came to my mind. There's another study that piled up over the last couple of weeks here about marijuana's, regular cannabis use possibly affecting our vision. And as a guy who recently had to get glasses, that was of concern to me. Is there anything to this?
I'm afraid I've got the cheaters for my reading things as well. But what happened here is that basically there's a 10 millisecond delay in one of the visual processing components of the brain, and that 10 milliseconds is super critical if you're playing video games.
Oh, so all these video gamers that I've heard of that like to smoke pot, they may actually be doing themselves a disservice to their video game skills.
They're going to have to practice a lot harder.
Well, that the pot might make that a little bit easier to do, I'd imagine.
Exactly.
Well, it's good to hear that. So this is not anything with the actual vision, but like the tracking or how quickly we pick something out of the.
There's a ganglion in the brain involved in the way we perceive color and other aspects of vision, and it just seems to fire up a little more slowly in folks who use cannabis 7 days a week.
And 10 milliseconds, is that like the blink of an eye, isn't it?
Quite literally, yes.
Okay, well, it comes back to, when I hear those studies that say, well, marijuana use is going to cost this many points of IQ, and it's like, well, how smart am I supposed to be? How quick do my eyes have to work? It's as if, any tiny little deficit is reason enough to lock people up over it. Makes no sense to me.
Well, we have no idea how many stats they ran before they found this one.
Yeah, this is the one they could finally find any bad part for.
Exactly.
Good point.
Exactly.
Well, following up, over the last week, a beloved sportscaster, a guy named Craig Sager, passed away. Who's always had I've had a soft spot in my heart for him because of the way he dresses. I just love his outrageous suits. But that leads me to a basketball story. Chauncey Billups, a basketball player, former player, said that some of the players who smoked pot before they played NBA ball, we're talking, pro league ball, played better. And he attributed it to them, in a big game situation, reducing the anxiety that they might feel before the game. Didn't have anything to do with their shooting touch or ability to dribble or anything. But that leads me to wonder, could we see a point at which the sporting leagues may consider marijuana not a bad drug because it's illegal, but a bad drug because it's performance enhancing?
Well, if there's a Twinkie at stake.
Maybe not for the Nathan's hot dog eating contest.
Right. No, I do think that there probably is kind of an inverted U where too much would actually impair, but that a little bit might help folks, particularly if it's a focusing strain or one that is going to decrease pregame jitters. But all in all, I don't see it making a big impact either way, and it seems unfair that folks who play professional sports, particularly a sport that is prone to some inflammatory-related injuries, those guys don't have access to medical cannabis, and that's just a shame.
I think with 8 legal states now, you got Massachusetts, there's the Boston Celtics, right? California, you got a few, Lakers and Kings and Warriors, got a bunch of teams out there that are playing in the legal states. Let's just let those teams smoke it up before the game and see how well the records turn out. This could be our own little experiment, Dr. Mitch.
It seems like a natural experiment waiting to happen.
Randomly selected, maybe not so much, but all right. And our last study that we're taking a look at for the day, we're going to wind this one up. It says a new study suggests marijuana could be a miracle drug in the bedroom. Ooh, what's going on here, Dr. Mitch?
Unfortunately, this is actually a review of studies from back in the day, and I actually mentioned these in my book, Understanding Marijuana. But yeah, small doses seem to have at least men and sometimes women report improved sexual functioning. I should add, it is not a lubricant.
and isn't there an issue in that's almost like an anti-lubricant where we're talking for women in the case that, just like you get dry mouth, is there anything to that?
All mucous membranes dry, I'm afraid, so keep your Astroglide handy.
And so this, we've got some of these products that are being manufactured now in the legal states. These sexual aids, lubricants, and suppositories, all sorts of things. Is there Is there a conflict there having a cannabis-infused lube? Is it like putting a humidifier and a dehumidifier in the same room and letting them fight it out?
I'm afraid there are some parallels, but if the lube is a good one, having a little THC might make the rest of the experience improved as well.
All right. Well, folks, we're running out of time here with Dr. Mitch. It's our last shot here at the end of 2016, and I want to thank you, Dr. Mitch, for joining us for yet another year and giving us the benefit of all your research and knowledge.
Hey, it's really a pleasure, and I'm looking forward to doing the same next year.
Now, you're still with the Burning Issues podcast?
Indeed, and we should have another one up probably a week from today.
What are you covering in the next episode?
So I've got an interview in the can with Ashley Grace of CW Hemp. That's going to be on the show Hempire. And Stacy Gruber, the Harvard researcher who does neuropsych testing with folks who use cannabis, and that should be coming up soon as well.
And real quick before we let you go, we talked briefly, and we're going to get Paul Armentano on the show probably tomorrow, but the DEA and its scheduling rule on CBD, do you see anything new there, or has CBD, in your opinion, always been illegal?
It's been Schedule 1 since day one. I'm sorry for the folks who've been shipping it and getting the gums and things like that. I do think it's completely non-psychoactive and utterly harmless, so I have no idea why it's illegal, but I've been saying that about cannabis for years. All right.
Well, thank you, Dr. Mitch Earlywine. And folks, you can email Dr. Mitch at 420research@gmail.com if you got a private question. We'll talk to you in 2017. Have a happy Hanukkah and a happy New Year, Dr. Mitch.
You too, man. Take care.
All right. Stay tuned, folks. We'll have time for a radical rant. Going to talk about, can you be a cannabis capitalist and a marijuana activist at the same time? I think you can. We'll be right back.
This is the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com.
From dabs to chivas, sativas to indicas, we roll out a whole concentrate of fresh new content every week. It's like going from the greenhouse to the dispensary. CannabisRadio.com.
The next generation of vaporizers has arrived. Vuber vaporizers are blazing the way with unparalleled technology for oil, concentrate, or dry flower pens. Providing unsurpassed customer service and expert craftsmanship, Vuber vaporizers use cutting-edge technology, providing a power-packed, smoother vapor with a lifetime guarantee. Experience vaporizing the way it was meant to be. The Vuber way.
Ignite the conversation on some trending topics along the Cannabis Radio social media network. Join our crew of thousands on our Cannabis Radio page on Facebook or at Canna Radio, CANNA Radio on Twitter. Plus, look for our Facebook and Google Plus pages for all of our original programs and connect with Dr. Dina, Kyle Cushman, Dr. Mitch Earlywine, Nurse Heather, Doc Rob, the hosts of Ganjapreneur, and more. Connect with the growing Cannabis Radio social crusade at Canna Radio on Twitter or search for Cannabis Radio on Facebook, Google Plus, and Instagram and grow with us.
You're listening to the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com, where we don't change our mind on decriminalization during an election year.
New beginner guitars and banjos are often constructed much better than ones built before your time. Why struggle? Get a new instrument or fix the old one. The trusted professionals at the Fingerboard Extension will evaluate your instrument for free. Repairs are priced for people who work for a living. Stop by the Fingerboard Extension downtown Corvallis at 120 Northwest 2nd Street today, or check out its inventory on the web at fingerboardextension.com.
We must wage what I have called total war against public enemy number one.
I support a change in law to end federal criminal penalties for possession of up to 1 ounce of marijuana.
That marijuana, pot, grass, whatever you want to call it, is probably the most dangerous drug.
Some think there won't be room for them in jail. We'll make room.
I experimented with marijuana a time or two, and I didn't like it and didn't inhale.
One major responsibility is to encourage people to use less drugs.
Entirely legitimate topic for debate.
Radical Rant.
Well, I was just in Florida the last 2 or 3 days, and while I was down there following up on the news, when I caught word of the arrest of the Prince of Pot, Mark Emery, great friend to the show, great friend of the legalization movement, Mark Emery, up in Montreal, being arrested by the police there for opening up 6 more of the cannabis culture dispensary locations. And Mark was arrested. Jody was also arrested later, according to my Twitter timeline, as well as Jeremiah Vandermeer from Cannabis Culture, one of their assistants, does a lot of the web work, a lot of their pot TV work. Good guy. And following the arrests, of course, Jody and others have been speaking out on the fact that the Trudeau government, the Liberals, ran on the platform that they would legalize marijuana and have been dragging their feet. They've been, just kind of dilly-dallying on the issue. So Cannabis Culture is moving forward and starting and opening these shops. And so the mayor of Montreal, in a series of tweets in French that I had translated, basically responded with, "The law is the law. You must follow the law. The law has not changed yet. And you must face the consequences, and you would be better off trying to change the law than trying to do some PR stunt. This terrible stunt you've done." I know, lousy French accent for a guy with a French surname, I know. But anyway, the mayor's point, Dennis Cordell, something like that. The mayor's point was, well, it's illegal. The law is the law. And it seems to me a little, I don't know. It seems to me that you're just nitpicking a little bit at this point. The people want the law changed. The government wants to change the law, but while it's still illegal, you're going to go way out of your way to make sure to bust people and to bust it all up. Don't start without us, basically. And that's been the response from Justin Trudeau as well, is that it's still the law. We haven't legalized yet. Hold your horses, basically. Well, as far as whether or not this is a PR stunt, this is where I want to take the rant today. It is the idea of capitalism and activism. Because as I was discussing this online, I was making some jabs about, the law is the law, Mrs. Parks. You must sit in the back of the bus, right? This idea that when people are fighting for civil liberties, and let's be clear, access to cannabis is a civil liberty. I've discussed it many times on this show. It comes out of the ground, and nobody's got the right to tell you can't use it or have it. This is a civil right, a civil liberty. And people bristle sometimes when I compare it to things like Rosa Parks and the Selma Bridge and Stonewall riots and stuff like that. But it is similar, if not in the size or scope, at least in the spirit. And it's the idea that sometimes you got to make the establishment uncomfortable. Sometimes you got to push the limits. Sometimes you got to break the law, especially if it's an unjust law. And what could be more unjust than stopping people who want to sell cannabis from selling it to people who want to buy it in a country where people want that to happen, and the government has said they want to make that happen, and just recently a task force came out and said it should happen. It's just petty to want to keep enforcing the law. I mean, here in Oregon, we had a whole bunch of places that opened that were these dispensaries way before our dispensaries were legal. They start opening around 2011, 2012. They start popping up all around. By 2013, our legislators are touring these places to get an idea, as they write the law, how are we going to do it? How's it going to work? What are the practicalities involved? They wouldn't have had that if those people hadn't stepped up and started running their dispensaries illegally. And ironically, the drug task forces, like the week before this 2013 law was supposed to go into effect, they conducted an Operation Storefront. They conducted these raids and raided 3 of the best places, like the ones that the government was modeling the law on, the ones that were doing it the right way. dotting the I's and crossing the T's and checking the IDs and logging the medicine and following the limits and all that kind of stuff you'd want people to do under a law, they went and busted them because it was their last chance to bust somebody. And similarly, that's what Mark and Jody are doing in Canada right now. They're trying to set a standard of here's what a professional, well-run, responsible type of cannabis outlet can be. Now, I visited their stores in Vancouver while I was up there. And very similar to what you'd find in any of the legal states here. Storefronts and IDs checked and nice displays and weed under glass and some security and some video cameras and so forth. This is what we want to see happen. Here in Oregon, when we passed our legalization, it didn't go into effect immediately, right? We passed it in November of 2014. It didn't go into effect until July 1st of 2015. So there were 7 months, December through June, where weed was illegal to possess. It was still, you could still get a ticket for possession. You could still get a misdemeanor or felony for greater possession or growing or selling and all that kind of stuff, right? But most of our DAs, after Measure 91 passed, most of the DAs stopped taking any more of these cases. They could have been like the mayor of Montreal and said, oh, the law is the law. It has not changed yet. Oh. They could have done that. They could have busted more people. They could have taken more cop time and ruined more lives. But they didn't because they realized, hey, the people have spoken here. And the wheels of bureaucracy turn slowly. But the principle of the people wanting to end arrests over marijuana shouldn't. John Kerry, when he was coming back from Vietnam back in the day, stood before a Senate committee and asked, how can you ask a man to be the last man to die for a mistake? Right? And that principle is, who's going to be the last person you bust after the people have already said they shouldn't be busted? The people of Canada don't want people busted anymore. People in the United States don't want people busted anymore. This whole continent is getting to a point, well, maybe not Mexico. They're highly religious and conservative on the issue. But at least in Canada and the United States, 60% in the United States, I don't know what the latest poll is up in Canada, but I know it's over 50, that support legalization. In America right now, you got 1 out of 5 American adults living in a state where it's legal. Another 2 out of 5 living where it's medical. 60% of our population lives where there's at least medical access, and 60% think it ought to be legal. So what is the point, Montreal mayor, of making these busts? To dissuade other people from opening their shops too early? Okay. And if you succeed at that, then what? It becomes legal, and then what? People open shops. And so what harm was created in the couple of months before it was legal that wasn't created in the couple of months after it was legal? You getting your tax cut, right? You're getting your piece of the pie. You having some say over how it's done. But it's not as if Mark and Jody are trying to open up these Wild West, unregulated, crazy sorts of places. They have good procedures going on. They're making sure people's IDs are checked. My ID was checked. I got gray in the temples, man. Hair coming out the ears. Wrinkles around my eyes. They're still checking my ID to make sure I'm at least 19. Yeah, I'm like 3 times 19 almost. 2 times 19 at least. 2.5, something like that. It's just ridiculous. And as far as can you be a capitalist and an activist, one of the people arguing with me about this said, well, don't believe their vows of poverty. They're not just opening these things for legal to try to flout the law. They're trying to make money. Okay, what's wrong with that? As far as I'm concerned, since 2010, I've seen the profit motive. I've seen money, both in the idea of people making businesses to make money and states hoping to make tax money. In both cases, I've seen that move marijuana policy more in the past 6 years than all the hippy-dippy love fairy wish and hope kind of stuff has done in the 3 decades prior. We'll talk a little bit more about that in hour 2, but that's all the time I got here for hour 1. For everyone here at CannabisRadio.com, I'm Radical Russ. We got another hour coming. And until next time, take care of each other, tokers.
This is the Russ Belville Show. The Russ Belville Show is blogging and podcasting daily at RadicalRuss.com.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth.